What's up, people? I'm one of your hosts, Phoenix.
And I am your other host, Titan.
And welcome to NTAT. So in today's video, we want to talk about what the real problem is with Diablo 4. Now, we're still in the middle of playing. Yeah. We're enjoying it. We absolutely love the game. But obviously, this game is everywhere. There's veteran players, there's new players, there's returning players. Everybody's jumping in and consuming this game, and there's a lot of strong opinions that are going on about the game, some good, some bad, some indifferent. But I really want to have a discussion about what we think is some of the actual problems with the game. Because when you have a game like this, and it is an amazing game, it really is, it's such a good game, but when you have a game like this, it's going to open up the door to extremes on either end, right? Yeah. You know, this game is absolute trash, or this game is the greatest game of all times. You know, you're going to end everything in between. And so when some of the critiques come in, you kind of have to cherry pick what's there. I remember seeing a video that, and I can't remember who did it, but the title was, "After 100 hours, I finally realized that Diablo is not a great game." And all I could do was chuckle. And I was like, well, I mean, if it was great for 100 hours, then it was a great game.
It was a good game.
Right? Yeah. So I actually want to talk about what I think and what you think is the major problem. And I want to start with this. Diablo 4 decided to go down the road of the looter, right? Yeah. We can't call it the looter shooter, but it's the looter. And usually what that means is the game is basically broken up into two parts. You have your main game, so that's going to be your campaign, your leveling, getting your powers, you know, that sort of thing. And then you have an end game. And the end game is kind of where you min-max and where you fight the hardest enemies and bosses and where you get some of the best loot. That is where I think the major problem for Diablo lies.
Yeah, I agree. And our style of playing is a little bit different, and we've talked about this before, is I am usually the type of person that rushes through a game. You know, I don't spend a whole lot of time doing the side dungeons, doing the side stuff, and so for me, this game becomes really difficult when it comes to the amount of time that it takes to play this game. You cannot hop in and out of this game whatsoever. When you hop on, you're gonna spend at minimum an hour. And that's if you're not doing anything else but one thing.
Right.
This game takes a long time to play. And so a lot of people, if it wasn't for you, I would probably rush through this game really fast and not get the enjoyment that I should out of it.
Right. And I think part of that issue there, or there's when you have the two communities that are split, again, where we're more on the end of playing through the campaign, and as you talked about now, kind of exploring the world, because unbelievably, the story is really good.
It is.
The story is really good. The looting's really good. The skills are great. Being able to kind of fix your build. And as you talked about, you're gonna spend a minimum of an hour. And that's because once you jump in, you're gonna spend 15, 20 minutes in your menu.
Yeah.
As I said in the previous video, hallmark of a great RPG, right?
Yeah.
But you have this crowd. But then you have the in-game crowd. And normally the in-game crowd is looking to bypass the campaign, right? They're going to zoom through it as fast as possible, which means that they're going to spend 10 hours a day playing. They're going to knock it out. And there was a tiny percent, but there were players who had the campaign beat and got their character to level 100 within the first couple of weeks.
Yeah.
And when the developers first came out talking about how long it was going to take to get to that point, said it was probably going to take about 150 hours. Well, that should kind of let you know what those players were doing, and they're all proficient at doing it.
Yeah.
So they reached the end game. So the rest of us are at level 10 at that point, right?
Yeah.
We're at level 20. We're slowly, you know, or rather a decent pace going through the game, and then they're reaching a point where they're like, hey, here's the list of problems.
Yeah.
Right? And so as they're going over these lists of problems, some of them are valid, some of them aren't. The developers jumping in and starting to make changes.
Yeah.
And so those changes then affect the people on side A, who are still kind of making their way through the game. So all of a sudden, you've got a build that doesn't work as well as it did, and you don't quite know why. And that's because a patch came in and fixed something that happened for this, you know, percent of a percent.
Yeah.
And now you're dealing with that.
Yeah.
Now, again, there is a good side to that because they're getting to see some of the problems that we will eventually see, and they can kind of call it out. Maybe those things are fixed by the time we get there, which is a plus. But lots of times these two communities, they clash.
Yeah.
And we know some people who are like, hey, I don't care anything about the campaign. The game doesn't start till we get to end game.
Yeah. And that, like they've said before, if the end game's not good, the entire game's trash.
Right.
And that is a very small percentage of these players. So someone that hasn't played Diablo, someone that hasn't had the familiarity of the game, are going to hear these reviews and be like, well, this game sucks, this game's trash. I'm not even going to play it, I'm not going to spend my time on it. And then you've potentially lost a customer that could be a lifelong fan of the game.
Exactly. And that's why I said I was actively not thrilled to hear that that's the route that they were going, because Diablo, as you're starting to learn, is a very good franchise.
Yeah.
It is a very unique and fun style of play, and especially in co-op, there's a lot of fun to be had. But when you have these two communities battling each other, not literally, but what their goals are completely opposite.
Yeah.
But when the developers step in to make those changes, they inadvertently affect both sides.
Yeah.
And that's a difficult thing to do. It's something that, as a longtime Destiny player, have seen for many, many years, where they were trying to balance PvP and PvE in the same game at the same time. And it never works out well.
Yeah.
Never, and it has not to date, as the game is reaching its 10-year mark, has not worked.
Yeah.
I can see that happening with Diablo. I can envision it with all these videos coming out about how bad in-game is and it's boring. And a lot of us are still making our way through the campaign. A lot of us are making our way through our first character, where there's players who've had multiple characters. They're ready for the first season to come out.
Yeah.
You know, a number of these things. And again, when there's complaints about the game and developers step in and say, hey, we want to keep our customers happy, let's make these changes, well, the other side is going to be inadvertently affected.
Yeah.
You know, just the same as vice versa, right?
Yep.
So if there's a build that you have and you're working through the campaign and the developers say this is too weak or too strong and they balance it, well, it's going to affect the in-game crowd as well.
Yeah.
And so that's something that I think is the real problem with the game. And then, of course, you have the cash shop.
Yep.
Now, most of the time you can say, you know, well, look, microtransactions for skins, not a big deal. Take it or leave it. But I've always been the mind of, hey, give me the coolest loot in the game. Allow me to earn that. Don't have me looking at it, you know, in the cash shop like, yeah, that looks a lot better than what I have. And I know that was a big issue for you that you mentioned in our previous video, you know, for your Necromancer. You really didn't like a lot of the gear that you were getting, the style and the look. But as soon as you go into the shop, it's like, oh my God, that would look fantastic.
Yeah.
You know, and that drives me crazy because that's a slippery slope. And most of the time, the companies are going to fall down that slippery slope.
Yeah, and we see it with pretty much every major gaming company so far, is that they start introducing microtransactions here, and then it just gets worse and worse and worse. And so, you know, that definitely hurts the game a lot.
I agree. And again, to reference Destiny again, that's something that happened there too. When the game first introduced microtransactions, it was just emotes. It was like, oh, this is all we're gonna do. You fast forward now, and everything about the game sends you right to the cash shop. You know, we have ships and shaders and skins and armor and everything. It's like, this is where you need to go. You don't have anything to do, go to the cash shop. Oh, you just unlocked this, go to the cash shop. You know, and so you're right. It's something that we see with a lot of major companies, and they're gonna make money off of it. It's just gonna happen. You know, there's a lot of whales, and it's not a lot of whales, but they are whales. And so if they're spending all this cash, they're making money. They're like, hey, let's put a little bit more in it, and a little more, and a little bit more. And next thing you know, you're like, why am I not earning this in the game?
And it's kind of like the recent increase in game prices.
Right.
Games have went up $10 extra, and sometimes even more if you're going to buy a deluxe edition or something. You know, you used to be able to buy a game for $50, $60.
Right.
Now it's $80 to $100. And it's just going to get worse from here. Is that they're always wanting more and more money. So it's like, why are we paying full price for a game, even more, just to have to spend even more money for things that make the game, you know, sometimes even playable. Sometimes they have mechanics that you have to buy, or you're just going to be crippled in a way.
Exactly, I 100% agree. And again, slippery slope. And you know what, that's not even a fair assessment either, because it's not a slippery slope. They're just going to jump down it. We just talked about this. Every company, as soon as they start, eventually they're going to get to that point.
Yeah.
And that's something that I can see happening with Diablo down the line. Now, I don't know if you've researched or you know much about the Diablo seasons, but they're kind of I guess you would say, the de facto DLC, right,
Yeah.
for the game. Not in the traditional sense, right, where you would get maybe a newer campaign, new armor, new. In the seasons, it's going to be a little bit different. Now, I'm not going to get deep into the seasons and how they work, but what I will say is that this is another contention for the player base, because newer players are coming in and like, oh man, you know, I'm playing with my character, I'm enjoying it, and then they've heard when you jump into the season, you can't use that character.
Yep.
You actually create a new character and then level that character up.
Yep.
And that's causing a lot of confusion. A lot of people are really upset about it, because this is different than the standard.
Yeah, and every season you're gonna have to create a whole new character every time, and that's gonna probably get really old, really fast.
Yeah, and that's why I said you've got two camps, right? And so for the camp who enjoys like going through the campaign methodically, you know, just enjoying every nook and cranny, versus the in-game crowd, you know, veteran Diablo players, like this is like, hey, this is what Diablo is. We're good. We know what this is. We've done this in Diablo 3. We understand it. This is how it works. We're set. We knew what we were going to do before this game even came out. For new players, as they're coming in and they're starting to hear this and understand it, they're like, what is that? Like, I have my character I really like. I don't want to have to redo another character. Or I don't want to have to redo the character that I have to participate in this season. And then you're going to have the other side is like, well, then you don't have to play it, you know. And again, having two camps in one game, those to me are the biggest issues with these types of games. Because they cause so much friction.
And the big question is, who are they going to cater to?
And it becomes difficult, because those two are vastly different consumers. Like myself, I do love DLC. I do. But I have ceased to really like, I guess you would say, looter type games, at least for the long term. So I'm going to enjoy Diablo. I'm going to beat the campaign. I'm going to play afterwards. But then when I'm ready to play it again, I'm probably going to create a new character and experience that all over again. I doubt I'm going to jump into the season and be this long-time player that's playing day in and day out every day for the next 5 or 6 years. That's just not going to be me, and I think that's going to be the mass majority, right? And then you have the other side. That's going to be your people that you're going to make the money off of. Because the in-game crowd are the ones who are going to pay for the season. They're going to pay for the skins. They're going to do all this, but they're a smaller amount. And so, like you said, this is where the contention comes from. Who are they going to cater to? Because if you cater to the more casual audience, that's, you know, for lack of a better phrasing, you know, then you're going to really hurt your cash cows, right? But if you put more into the cash cows, you're going to alienate any new players or potential players.
All right, folks, that wraps up our video for today. So like always, if you enjoy this content, like, subscribe, and turn notifications on, and join us every Friday morning. We'll be there, you be there.